Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Glenesha. I'm with Family Network on Disabilities Poppin', and we are back with another presentation. We are doing the series called It's a Great Idea, and today we are going to talk about the IDEA pillar of the right of students with disabilities to a free, appropriate public education. If you caught my last webinar, I gave you an overview of the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And there are 6 pillars of IDEA, and FAPE, known as a free appropriate public education, is one of them. So let's go ahead and get started and learn some powerful information. Family Network on Disabilities is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, meaning we don't work for local, state, or federal agencies or schools. We are funded in part by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Health. We are a free service because of grants. We are the statewide Parent Training Information Center, known as the PTI, and the statewide Family to Family Health Information Center. We are family driven. We were founded in 1985 by parents of children with disabilities who came together for mutual support and sharing of information. Family Network on Disabilities is a national network for individuals of all ages who may be at risk, have disabilities, or have special needs and their families. We also serve professionals and concerned citizens. F&D is unique due to the majority of our board members, management staff, and all field staff have family members who are persons living with disabilities. So I am a little unique. I think that goes along with my middle name. My middle name is Monique, so I like to say I am a unique Monique. But I am not someone who has a child that's living with a disability. I am living with a disability. I am a former music teacher from Escambia County, so I have the background in education and I am still a teacher. I currently teach phlebotomy to adults, but I live with rheumatoid arthritis, which is a very painful and it could be a very degenerative disease in which my body gets confused and it thinks that the synovial fluid in my joints is toxic to me. So it tries to destroy that synovial fluid and it can bring stiffness and joint damage and pain and affect other areas of my body. And so I enjoy working with Family Network on Disabilities because I work alongside people who understand disability, whether it is physical, medical disability, or whether it's intellectual, whether it's a mood disorder, a mental health issue. These are all things that are affecting our daily lives and making life a bit more difficult for us. But working with a company that understands my disability and what I go through is really wonderful. And I feel so blessed now to be able to give back and help families who are struggling on the education side and their child needs some help because their child has a disability and they need some ESC services at their school or additional resources to help them understand their child's disability. So we're all family here. And I like that we're called Family Network on Disabilities because we truly are family and we do truly show care for one another and the things that we go through. It's very important that every time I come before you, I give you our disclaimer, what we do and what we don't. I may be a former school teacher from the public school system, but I am not before you as a teacher. I am before you as a parent training coordinator. So our attorney states, we are not attorneys, doctors, or mental health professionals. The following information is not legal or medical advice. However, we do share information, resources, and supports for you and your family. Information is research-based to create our trainings, and we always encourage collaboration with schools and agencies. And then if you look at it like this, open it up, and our child is right there in the middle because we're hovering our child. They are going to be of most importance, and we're working together for the greater good of that child. So in our last presentation, I gave an overview of IDEA. And so today we're going to focus on the pillar of FAPE. But before I do that, let me give you a little information about IDEA, just in case you didn't see the first webinar. The purposes of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act have their roots in the past, when children with disabilities were often excluded from schools. This history can clearly be seen in the findings that Congress states at the very beginning of the law, as most recently amended in 2004. Public Law 108-446 states their findings. Congress finds the following. 1. Disability is a natural part of the human experience and in no way diminishes the right of individuals to participate in or contribute to society. Improving educational results for children with disabilities is an essential element of our national policy of ensuring equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for individuals with disabilities. 2. Before the date of enactment of the Education for All Handicapped Children Act of 1975, this is Public Law 94-142, the educational needs of millions of children with disabilities were not being fully met because A, the children did not receive appropriate educational services. B, the children were excluded entirely from the public school system and from being educated with their peers. C, undiagnosed disabilities prevented the children from having a successful educational experience. Or D, a lack of adequate resources within the public school system forced families to find services outside the public school system. So it's very nice that now we no longer have to worry about our child's needs not being fully met because of these things that I mentioned here. I'm going to take us to one of my favorite resources, probably my most favorite, parentcenterhub.org. And you can click here. Well, I'm going to click here, and you can go there on your own, parentcenterhub.org. And you can look at Part B of IDEA, and it makes it much easier for you to understand rather than looking at the actual law. And you just scroll here, and it goes through all of the different disabilities. It goes through what special education is, related services, anything that you can imagine that you don't understand. And then it cites the actual law. And the law here is going to be those 300s. And that's where it can get really confusing. So this is my number one resource that I like to share with families. So I'm going to take us out of that and back to our presentation. Okay, those findings are the foundation for the development of the 6 major principles of IDEA, known as the pillars of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. These 6 pillars are free, appropriate public education, appropriate evaluation, individualized education plan, least restrictive environment, parent participation, and the procedural safeguards. Today, we are going to expand on the first one, the right to students with disabilities to a free, appropriate public education. IDEA was originally passed in 1975 as Public Law 94-142. Then it was called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act and gave grants to the states for the education of children with disabilities. Since then, it has been amended many times, while always maintaining its original purpose to ensure that children with disabilities have access to a free, appropriate public education. In 2006, the U.S. Department of Education released final regulations for the amended IDEA passed by Congress in 2004. The regulations officially state that the major purposes of IDEA are to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free, appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services designed to meet their unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living, to ensure that the rights of children with disabilities and their parents are protected, to help states, localities, educational service agencies, and federal agencies provide for the education of all children with disabilities, and to assess and ensure the effectiveness of efforts to educate children with disabilities. What is free, appropriate public education? Free appropriate public education, known as FAPE, is the term used in the federal law IDEA to describe the right of a student with a disability to receive special services that will meet their individual learning needs at no cost to the parent. Having a disability can get very costly when you think of services, when you think of therapies, if there's medications involved, if there's special schooling involved. But we have FAPE because of IDEA. The idea of free appropriate public education means special education and relevant services that are provided to children and youth with disabilities at public expense, under public supervision and direction without charge. Meet the standards of the State Educational Agency, or CSEA, including the requirements of IDEA. Include preschool, elementary school, or secondary school education in the state involved, and are provided in keeping with individualized education programs known as the IEP. You may also hear individualized education plan. That's the individualized plan for your child and your child only. That meets the requirements of IDEA. So we're going to break it down even more, as you see here on the screen. So let's talk a little bit about the actual law. So part of the law, starting with 300.101, Free Appropriate Public Education, FAPE. A is general information. A free appropriate public education must be available to all children residing in the state between the ages of 3 and 21, including children with disabilities who have been suspended or expelled from school as provided for in the law 300.530D. I am not exactly sure what that part of the law says, but as I said, ParentCenterHub.org, you can go and read the entire law in a more layman's understanding and layout. So we started with A, general. Now let's get more specific. B, FAPE for children beginning at age 3. 1, each state must ensure that 1, the obligation to make FAPE available to each eligible child residing in the state begins no later than the child's 3rd birthday, and 2, an IEP or an IFSP is in effect for the child by that date in accordance with the law 300.323B. So an IEP is going to be for our school-age children, and then an IFSP is going to be for our early intervention, early step services. 2, if a child's third birthday occurs during the summer, the child's IEP team shall determine the date of when services under the IEP or IFSP will begin. So we've already talked about A, our general understanding, B, FAPE for children beginning at age 3, and then C, children advancing from grade to grade, our school agers. 1, each state must ensure that FAPE is available to any individual child with a disability who needs special education and related services, even though the child has not failed or been retained in a course or grade and is advancing from grade to grade. 2, the determination that a child described in the paragraph A of this section is eligible under this part must be made on an individual basis by the group responsible within the child's LEA for making eligibility determinations. And this is basically talking about yearly your IEP team, your child's team coming together, making a decision for a child on an individual basis. Let's discuss these other FAPE requirements according to IDEA. So some other FAPE requirements, these are all the law here. When I talk about the 300s, if you go and you look at the actual law, you'll see the 300 symbol, or this symbol here, and then you'll see the 300 number, and then it'll give you more information. So if I go and look at the law, I'm going to see it started out 300.104, residential placement, and it'll give me all the legal information about it. But it's legal information, so it makes it a little difficult to understand. That's why I really enjoy ParentCenterHub.org. But I also enjoy Rights Law, which is another website that you can look at the law in a more layman's way to easier understand. So some other FAPE requirements: free appropriate public education, residential placement, if the child needs placement to live, assistive technology. Let's say your child needs some type of technology to help them do their schoolwork. Extended school year services. This is not summer school. This is extended school year services in a situation where your child needs to extend their school year, because if we end the school year, it could be detrimental to their progress and their learning. Non-academic services. Physical education, very important that our child with disabilities still receive physical education and may need to be modified. And then we have some other ones here that you can look at. So now let's discuss residential placement. We're going to break down the rest one by one as well. Residential placement. If placement in a public or private residential program is necessary to provide special education and related services to a child with a disability, the program, including non-medical care and room and board, must be at no cost to the parents of the child. So this is going to be the most restrictive or residential placement. Our least restrictive is our child being in the general education classroom. So when we get to the highest level of residential placement, it's very important that we understand the law behind that. Assistive technology is another part of FAPE. In part of the law, it explains here, A, each public agency must ensure that assistive technology devices or assistive technology services, or both, as those terms are defined in 300.5 and 300.6 respectively, are made available to a child with a disability if required as part of the child's 1, special education, 2, related services, 3, supplementary aids and services. And then B, on a case-by-case basis, the use of school-purchased assistive technology devices in a child's home or in other settings is required if the child's IEP team determines that the child needs access to those devices in order to receive FAPE. So if your child needs to take that device home in order for them to have free, appropriate public education. For example, they may need to do their homework and they have a device that they do their schoolwork with at school, but they need that same device for homework. Extended school year. So this one's a little bit more lengthy. It's 300.106, extended school year services. So starting with general, A, our general explanation. 1, each public agency must ensure that extended school year services are available as necessary to provide FAPE, consistent with paragraph A2 of this section. So now let's move on to A2. A2 states, extended school year services must be provided only if a child's IEP team determines it on an individual basis. So not everybody. And this is going to be in accordance with the law 300.320 through 300.324 that services are necessary for the provision of FAPE to the child. Like I explained, if your child is going to be in a situation where stopping their schooling at the end of the traditional school year would be detrimental to their learning and to the progress that they've made. So let's go on to 3. 3, in implementing the requirements of the section, a public agency may not, 1, limit extended school year services to particular categories of the disability, or 2, unilaterally limit the type, amount, or duration of these services. So first we talked about A, which is going to be the general understanding of extended school year services. Now let me give you the definition, B. As used in this section, the term extended school year services means special education and related services that are 1, provided to a child with a disability beyond the normal school year of the public agency in accordance with the child's IEP and at no cost to the parents of the child, and 2, meet the standards of the SEA. And then we can also click on this here. Let me take you back to Parent Center Hub, and it will give you an easier understanding of the information that I just shared. FAPE requirements. And I'll scroll down. You can see what I just read to you was the general. And then it gives you even more information. And let's look at extended school year. Down here, there we go. So this is the information I just read to you, but it's much easier to understand. So when I mentioned A, the general understanding, then it gives us our definition of the extended school year service. And it does the same that I just read about assistive technology and residential placement. So again, take this website down as a resource for you to use to better help understand different parts of the law. All right, let's move on to non-academic services. This is part 300.107 of the law. The state must ensure the following. A, each public agency must take steps, including the provision of supplementary aids and services determined appropriate and necessary by the child's IEP team to provide non-academic and extracurricular extracurricular services and activities in the manner necessary to afford children with disabilities an equal opportunity for participation in those services and activities. B, non-academic and extracurricular services and activities may include counseling services, athletics, transportation, health services, recreational activities, special interest groups or clubs sponsored by the public agency, referrals to agencies that provide assistance to individuals with disabilities, and employment of students, including both employment by the public agency and assistance in making outside employment available. And these are subparts that I'm reading to you, and we can get more information on them as well. Physical education, also part of FAPE. The state must ensure that public agencies in the state comply with the following. General, physical education services, specially designed if necessary, must be made available to every child with a disability receiving FAPE unless the public agency enrolls children without disabilities and does not provide physical education to children without disabilities in the same grades. So this is going to be based on the institution that the child is attending. Regular physical education. Each child with a disability must be afforded the opportunity to participate in the regular physical education program available to non-disabled students unless the child is enrolled full-time in a separate facility or the child needs specially designed physical education as prescribed in the child's IEP. So I spoke about this with music and art and PE special education. So it's very important that the child is educated with their peers who are non-disabled, but specifically focusing on physical education. They need to be included with their non-disabled peers. So when I was teaching in public school, the students would go to PE with a PE coach, and they would, most of the time, they would take a non-disabled general education class and then a ESC class, and they're usually the same grade or a grade above or below, and they would have their special area physical education time together. This allowed for least restrictive environment and FAPE as well. C, special physical education. So A is general explanation, B, regular physical education, C, special physical education. If specifically designed for physical education is prescribed in the child's IEP, the public agency responsible for the education of that child must provide the services directly or make arrangements for those services to be provided through other public or private programs. So this is going to take a little extra attention and work for the physical education teacher and the public school to help make sure that that child receives that special physical education. And then finally, D, education in separate facilities. The public agency responsible for the education of a child with a disability who is enrolled in a separate facility must ensure that the child receives appropriate physical education services in compliance with this section. And this is the physical education section. So this, like I said, may take some extra work on the part of the PE teacher to maybe teach the child one-on-one because they have a disability and they can't do special education, they can't do physical education with non-disabled peers. And then of course the agency as well. They're going to work to make sure they get the correct teachers in place and the time slot set up and the appropriate location set up for your child to be able to receive that special physical education under FAPE. And then 300.109, full educational opportunity goal. The state must have in effect policies and procedures to demonstrate that the state has established a goal of providing full educational opportunity to all children with disabilities, aged birth through 21, and a detailed timetable for accomplishing that goal. And this is the type of information that's going to be discussed in the IEP meetings. This can be very, very daunting for educators and for schools because we have thousands of children who receive some type of special education service. That is where we come in. So we are here to help you at F&D understand what's going on with your child. We can give you that individualized assistance because a lot of the times the school does not have the time to sit down side by side and explain every piece of information with you because they have to serve so many different children and their families. But it is part of their job to make sure that your child appropriately receives these services, but it's my job to make sure that you understand what your rights and responsibilities are and the school or the agency's rights and responsibilities are. It's my job to make sure you understand. And as I said, I am not a legal advisor. I am not a medical advisor. I'm not standing in the space as a teacher. I'm standing in the space as a parent training coordinator. So I'm training parents to better understand IDEA and all the laws that go along with it. Next, we have our program options as part of FAPE. The state must ensure that each public agency takes steps to ensure that its children with disabilities have available to them the variety of educational programs and services available to non-disabled children in the area served by the agency, including art, music, industrial arts, consumer and homemaking education, and vocational education. So this goes along with the special area that I was talking about earlier. And child find. So child find is a bit more detailed under FAPE. So let's understand child find. So our general understanding, the state must have in effect policies and procedures that ensure that all children with disabilities residing in the state, including children with disabilities who are homeless children or are ward of the state, and children with disabilities attending private schools, regardless of the severity of their disability, and who are in need of special education and related services are identified, located, and evaluated. And a practical method is developed and implemented to determine which children are currently receiving receiving needed special education and related services, hence the term child find. So we are going to be using identification, location, and evaluation for these children who are homeless, wards of the state, and children with disabilities attending private schools, regardless of the severity of their disability. Next is B, use of term developmental delay. The following provisions apply with respect to implementing the child find requirements of this section. 1. A state that adopts a definition of developmental delay determines whether the term applies to children aged 3 through 9 or to a subset of that age, for example, ages 3 through 5. A state may not require an LEA to adopt and use the term developmental delay for any children within its jurisdiction. If an LEA uses the term developmental delay for children described in 300.8 of the law, the LEA must conform to both the state's definition of that term and to the age range that has been adopted by the state. If a state does not adopt the term developmental delay, an LEA may not independently use that term as a basis for establishing a child's eligibility under this part. C is going to be other children in child find. Child find also must include children who are suspected of being a child with a disability under 300.8 and in need of special education, even though they are advancing from grade to grade. Two, highly mobile children, including migrant children. And finally, D, construction. Nothing in the Act requires that children be classified by their disability so long as each child who has a disability that is listed in 300.8 and who by reason of that disability needs special education and other related services regarded as a child with a disability under Part B of the Act. That was a mouthful. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us to parentcenterhub.org. I clicked out of that, but I'm going to exit the full screen and I am just going to search child find. And then I get all types of articles, 672 results. And so if I click on subpart D of the part C, I can scroll down, child find. I can get more information and better understand it. So if it was difficult to understand what I shared with you, you can come over to parentcenterhub.org. And LEA is escaping me. So let me search LEA. So LEA, Local Educational Agency. LEA was escaping me. I could not remember what it stood for. So LEA is your local educational agency. So let me go back to the B section, use of the term developmental delay, to make sure we better understand it using the words from LEA. The following provisions apply with respect to implementing the child find requirements of this section. A state that adopts a definition of developmental delay under the law determines whether the term applies to children aged 3 through 9 or to a subset of that age range. A state may not require an LEA or local educational agency to adopt and use the term developmental delay for any children within its jurisdiction. If a local educational agency uses the term developmental delay for the children described in the law, the LEA must conform to both the state's definition of that term and the age range that has been adopted by the state. If a state does not adopt the term developmental delay, an LEA may not independently use that term as basis for establishing a child's eligibility under this part. So this is important as well, too, to making sure we understand the use of the term developmental delay. So now I want to move on to individualized education programs or individualized education plan. So the program is the entire thing. The plan is subset to the specific part of your child's education and the actual goals and things that we're going to reach for your child within the school year. The law states and must ensure that an IEP or an IFSP, which is for early education, that meets the requirements of Section 636D of the Act is developed, reviewed, and revised for each child with a disability in accordance to 300.320 through 300.324, except as provided in 300.300. It seems a little bit overwhelming for you to give you these 300 numbers, like I said. However, though, when you come to Parent Center Hub, I believe you can actually just search some of these. So let me take this one here, 300.320, and this is part of the IEP. So I'm just going to search and see what it gives us. All right. So yes, I'm looking at this and I click on that and it takes me straight to subpart D of Part B regulations. And then, okay, I can jump right down here. So I said the state must ensure that an IEP or an IFSP that meets the requirements of Section 636D of the Act is developed, reviewed, and revised for each child with a disability in accordance to these laws. So the IEP has to be developed in accordance to these different laws. So we said 300.320, the definition of individualized education program, 300.324, development, review, and revision, and then except as provided 300. So I come back, parental consent. So if you're looking at a document and it's got all of these numbers, all we have to do is come to parentcenterhub.org and we can easily understand the law. Now, there is an actual IDEA website that gives you the actual law in its document form, and you can read that as well. But as I said, it can be a little bit confusing to understand. So now let's look at our next one, and I'm going to bring us back to our presentation. routine checking of hearing aids and external components of surgically implanted medical devices. So just to bring us back to make sure we understand, we are talking about additional sections of FAPE, or free, appropriate, of public education. So I had several slides back. I had shown you that there are several different additional portions of FAPE, and we've been talking about those. So the next additional portion is the routine checking of hearing aids and external components of surgically implanted medical devices. A, hearing aids. Each public agency must ensure that hearing aids worn in school by children with hearing impairments, including deafness, are functioning properly. B, external components of surgically implanted medical devices. One, subject to paragraph B2 of this section. So we could go to Parent Center Hub and look at that. Each public agency must ensure that the external components of surgically implanted medical devices are functioning properly. Two, for a child with a surgically implanted medical device who is receiving special education and related services under this part, a public agency is not responsible for the post-surgical maintenance, programming, or replacement of the medical device that has been surgically implanted or of an external component of the surgically implanted medical device. Very detailed information. So this is going to be important to you if your child is deaf or hard of hearing and they have an implanted surgical device or they have hearing aids. And you can get more detailed information at parentcenterhub.org. And so let me just go back and click to a few slides to make sure we understand. I gave you a lot of information, and it's important to me that you understand. So what we just discussed are additional FAPE requirements, and we went through each of these: residential placement, assistive technology, and so forth. And the final one we talked about was the routine checking of hearing aids and external components and so forth. So I'm going to bring us to the end of our presentation. So I want to thank you all for coming to another presentation as we are discussing It's a Great Idea, and we're talking about the great idea of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that was enacted for our children with disabilities to help them get the most appropriate, free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment possible. So there's still so much for us to learn, and I'm looking forward to sharing more information with you because we have 6 pillars and we've only discussed one: free, appropriate public education. So before I go, I want to share with you a little bit more about Family Network on Disabilities. These are our programs housed under Family Network on Disabilities. Each program provides a unique service to a specific population. PTI stands for Parent Training and Information Centers. We are funded in part by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs, known as OSEP. Poppin, which is my area, is known as Parents Offering Parents Information and Networking. And you can see here on the screen, I'll bring my arrow to it, that we are in North Florida. And I specifically am right here on the western side in the Panhandle. Then we have PSN, which serves Central and Southwest Florida, and they're known as Parent Support Network. Then we have PEN, which serves Central and Southeast Florida, known as Parent Education Network. And then we have our Family Star program, which is covered by the whole state. They're not broken up like our PTIs are. Our Family Star program is funded by the U.S. Department of Health under Health Resources and Services Administration. Family Star assists families of children and youth with special health care needs to make informed decisions about health care for their children. Inside F&D, we also have our F&D Special Needs Trust, which provides comprehensive special needs trust services, including service as a trustee, co-trustee, or trust administrator. We handle all types of special needs trusts. And finally, make sure you follow us on our socials. We are popular on social media. We have our website, www.fndusa.org, where you can find hundreds of resources. And then also we are on TikTok, we are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, and each of our PTIs, we all have our own Facebook page. So if you're wanting to look up the Facebook page for Poppin, you would search FND Poppin. And then we have FND PSN, FND PEN, and then we also have Family Star. So you just have to search on Facebook or on Instagram, wherever you would like to receive your social media information. So I thank you for coming to this presentation. It's a lot of information to learn, but the great thing is you can get finished with this recording and watch it again. So if you learned something new and you enjoy this presentation, please leave us a review so we can continue to help more families. And I would greatly appreciate it if you mentioned my name. All you need to do is scan this QR code, the black one that you see on the screen, and it will take you to a Google review. And then you can scan the blue QR code that you see on the screen if you like me and you are in the Panhandle area and you would like some individualized assistance. Scanning this QR code will bring you to my digital business card where you put in some information and then it comes to my email and then I will reach out to you. So I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I look forward to sharing more information of the It's a Great Idea series in the near future. Take care. Bye-bye.